topic as well. Thank you guys for being here. So I'm Massimo Morello. I'm an associate information security specialist at the Deutsche Börse. And the age probably is not relevant, but still let's put it there. And as he said, I'm going to talk about vulnerabilities, and mainly we will be focusing on vulnerabilities that they are supposed to be so, but in the end they turn out not to be. So let's have a look. Let's say the paper is a bit on a ironic streak. We call them mystical because they have a lot of traits. They make them unique, and in the end, as I said, they just create noise. And from governance perspective, unfortunately, it's a mess. Also from compliance perspective, because you have a lot of high numbers, and then in the end, you don't have a process or some tools to filter them out. So we call them like this because usually in the MVD they are disputed. There is a dispute between the researchers who are filing them, who are in the quest for fame, because having a CV in the resume is nice and everyone wants one, and the actual, the product managers who are disputing them. So it's really easy to see in the MVD disputed vulnerabilities. And another criteria we can say that vulnerabilities can be mystical if they have unconventional method of exploitations or unpredictable impact, and we're gonna see some of them. That's that's what happens most of the times. Hopefully, not many times to you. Hopefully, let's say the research relevance from my perspective, it's first of all sharing awareness, spreading awareness, forces collaboration between us, researchers, vendors, and so on. Then also exploring the dynamics, because we just find vulnerabilities in database and we don't know what's behind, how to validate them, and so on. And another one can be developing some strategies. Of course, we're not gonna change from scratch the MVD because the whole internet is running on it and so on. But we can add some layers to a bit scheme out the noise. I would say we should bother because of this, because it's cumbersome. No, vulnerability management, it's strictly related to asset inventory, to patch management mainly, and also unfortunately to compliance, because there is always to comply. So big numbers, they are always a bit scary, and we need a granular approach. We need something that we can put as an extra layer and filter out the info. So let's have some numbers, because I'm talking a lot about this, and the fun fact while researching is the fact that there are some papers out there, it's being studied actually in academia, the inaccuracy of the MVD, and also MITRE because it's the one feeding the MVD, and 56% they miss vulnerability type. 85% root cause, 38%, you have the percentages here, and it was interesting to see that. Then also from threat perspective, since we can easily say that unfortunately CVSS scores, they are not so threat oriented, then it's 1/3 of the vulnerabilities, they don't have a CWE associated with that, so you cannot link it back to a threat. Also, cross-site request forgery and cross-site scripting. There are 111 instances of vulnerabilities missing the user interaction, which is needed. I mean, if it's this kind of vulnerability, you need it, and it's not there. And also for cross-site request forgery, also 59. They are not super huge numbers, but from a global recognized standard, of course, you expect that they don't miss this type of info, especially considering the vulnerability. And then another fun fact is that there are many bodies who are like the Federal Civilian Department and agencies and the PCI data security standard, who are explicitly recommending to use the CVSS score as a risk score, and by definition is not. So I think there is something wrong there, and I don't know, it's under our nose, and things under your nose are difficult to see usually, even though they are close. So we need to spread a bit of awareness. Let's see a bit of cases, because the first case is I call them non-vulnerability bad intention, because it means that the vulnerability in the end is not a vulnerability, okay? And the bad intention is from the person who is filing that, meaning there is some guy or girl out there, they want a bit of fame, they want a CV on the resume, so they see something that they know is not a vulnerability, but still they know it will be validated by the MVD, they know it will be filed, so they do it. So let's have a look. This is the CV, and this is a second order SQL injection. Nice, you have all the stuff out there. Do you want to know what's the product affected? DVWA. So, I mean, it's actually still there, the record. So, if you don't know, I mean, it's a platform with implemented thousands of vulnerabilities on purpose because it's a learning tool. And the vulnerability stayed there in the MVD with a high score for some days, 5 days. Then it got rejected, but still it's worrying the fact that you file something against NVD, against the VWA, and MVD says, oh, yes, let's accept it. Then the second case, no vulnerability, but this time good intentions, meaning that we can assume the person who filed that had good intentions. They know it's a vulnerability and they do it, okay. It's Postgres, and this is the vulnerability. Why in the end is not a vulnerability? Because untrusted users cannot send this type of signal. So in the end is not. And anyway, the NVD, they accepted it, and the status got rejected, but again, after active, let's say, complaint from the vendor. Otherwise, it would have stayed there. But again, it was accepted, and which means there is not a filtering process there. Yes, now the other category. We said mystical vulnerabilities, either they are not vulnerabilities, or yes, they are, but they are unpredictable. And one of these cases, I'm sorry to scare you out, it's not Halloween anymore, but sometimes we see OpenSSL and Heartbleed out there. Let's talk about that, and then we forget. Why is it unusual? First of all, the initial score was 5.0. Even though it affected 30 to 70% of the global targeted systems. Then it moved to a 7.5 score, which, again, a vulnerability that manages to create so much pain highlights the fact that the CVSS score cannot be considered as a full score and that's it. Because 7.5% when you hack the world, let's say it misses a bit of granularity. Then the ease of exploitation, and then unconventional exploitation method. And interesting fact, 4 years ago, which means 6 years after it was filed, then still 200,000 machines were vulnerable. They are not good. I don't know what's the current status. I checked a bit, but yeah, that was not good. I hope you change your password, guys. Then let's talk about solutions and best practices. Again, probably you are really thrilled because you think I will change the MVD, but the answer is, as you cannot change the BGP, and we know it's flawed, but the whole internet runs around it, then you need to start by the MVD, and then you need to filter out some info. So let's say the goal is contributing to a more filter-oriented mindset, both from technical people and not technical people, because they see critical vulnerabilities and they think they need to be patched. But if you have a way to show that they're not critical, then it's good. And my suggestions, which are either complementary to the MVD or maybe alternatively, they are in terms of culture, scoring system, decision-making, sources, and databases. So culture. The first solution is not even distant from the process because it's simply becoming a CNA. So it's something obvious, but at the same time, open source projects that were really overwhelmed by vulnerabilities, they started joining now because they understood that otherwise they would see a lot of vulnerabilities concerning them, floating there, and they will not be passing by them, but they need to pass by them, they need to be validated by them. The downfall, unfortunately, is that there are still some white hats who are in the end are not white hats, which are vendors that they get the CNA and they don't provide much info to the MVD, and they keep the vulnerability as on hold. They can do it. They can keep it reserved, if I'm not mistaken, for 2 years. And the excuse is that they have big release cycles. So that's another thing, let's say, to fight, unfortunately. And then that's from cultural perspective, there is another thing. If you think about bug bounties, right? There is an army of bug bounties going around finding bugs. Why don't we also incentivize people to validate vulnerabilities when it comes to, inaccurate submissions that maybe they spread the chaos and so on? So an army of bug validators can be a good one. And I brought this term bug bounties because there are, as I said, there are some supposedly researchers who want a bit of fame and recognition. So they beg you to, accept either their CV, or they exploit the MVD, or maybe they scan some domains and you find an email, you are vulnerable, please give me some money. I mean, a bit summarized, but I have some slides, so I cannot go a bit more in depth than this. Scoring system. We almost need a scoring system for the scoring system. Yeah, unfortunately, but yeah. And then the solutions, let's say, complementary to what we already discussed. One of them can be the EPSS, because first of all, it's a exploit, which means threat oriented, and it can be used not to replace, of course, the CVSS score, but to filter out what is maybe critical, but then is not exploitable, for example. Okay, so it's still a complementary solution, and also it can work, let's say, a bit in the future. Let's say, because it's a predictive model, and it gets a lot of sources and see the patterns. So it gets Metasploit module, exploit DB, and so on. And it can be a good aid. And the ESS, if you didn't hear about that, I think it's like a version a bit more upgraded than the EPSS, because it gives you 2 scores: the exploit availability probability and exploit usage probability. It gets a lot of sources, a lot from Trend Micro, and so on, a non-exploit catalog of CISA, and so on. And the nice thing, why did I put in bold before? Because most of the times when a CVE gets released, you don't have the CVSS score for a long time, but with DSS, every time a CVE gets out, then you already have a ESS score, because it's based on historical data. It sees the pattern, it sees what happened to similar vulnerabilities and so on. It sees if there are some, let's say, hints of exploitations around and so on. And it calculates 2 scores. And if the exploit availability probability is super, super high, doesn't matter what happens to the exploit usage probability, we can already say that an exploit exists. Even if you're, let's say, again, it's a forecast, so that's how it works. And then this is a bit, let's say, a niche topic, because it's related to Tenable. So it's I thought to put it here to talk about that, because okay, it's similar to some of them. But the nice thing is that if you're talking about patching strategies and remediation strategies, remediating critical vulnerabilities based on CVSS scores, okay, if you take them, you have a certain, let's say, time window. But if you use this one, VPR, you have way more efficient results. As you can see, 20 times more efficient in patching emerging exploitations in the wild, and so on. Exploit code maturity. So here are some numbers that I can read, but as you can see, we can also discuss at the lunch break, and you can have a look. It's quite interesting. Then decision making. This is another thing. This time is not related to the scores, but it's related to a decision, because in the end, vulnerability management, it goes to patch management, right? So what do I patch first? I mean, we don't have, we are not infinite like employees in the world, and not everything can be automated, and not to a certain, it's always to a certain extent. So a stakeholder-specific vulnerability categorization is basically a model, okay, cost-benefit analysis, that you can also integrate with other methodologies. And CISA implemented based on the template their decision-making model with different outcomes. And the tree, for what they did, looks like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tree structure. It can be something else, but you can see exploitation. It can be active or not. Automatable, it can be yes or not. So based on this, you have a decision at the end, and you can use it to shape a single vulnerability management process. So not single vulnerabilities, but single vulnerability management processes. Let's say batches. Let's call it like this. And you have 4 stages: track, attend. So one requires, maybe we take a look. The other one, close monitoring. The other one involves the upper level, and the last one, management level. Then sources and databases. You have the one from the, let's say, if you want to have a bit of clean sources, the one from the Cloud Security Alliance. Probably some of you heard of it, but the good thing about this database is the fact that informations there are collaborative. Everyone can collaborate, and also in some security databases, some info are hidden and so on. There is not that much visibility, but here everything is it's clean and it is accessible to everyone. And again, it's collaborative. So you can also think to make your vulnerability management process start from here and not from the MVD. And another one, which is super important, is the open source, because it's unfortunately hot topic in vulnerability management. You have the OSV, so open source version in schema, that you can automate. And you have the API, they are accessible. And the way they do have a database, and the way vulnerabilities look like, the records, they are like this. So either you have the CVE or you have another identifier. And once you open the instances, you have a lot of information, like exploitations and if there are some modules and so on. But somehow you need to have a clear view when it comes to open source libraries, because there are supply chain vulnerabilities. So far, before we were talking about vulnerabilities that in the end they turn out not to be vulnerabilities, but now with supply chains we have the opposite. So vulnerabilities that are like, okay, they're hidden, I don't see them, I don't do anything, but in the end they turn out to be very, very concerning, like the SolarWinds example and so many examples. And thanks to this, it's a project by Google. You have all the dependencies there. You can search and you have a nice graph. And then the last one, probably some of you know, but attacker KB, I think, as a source, let's say, to maybe you get concerned about the vulnerability. Maybe before doing something, like a bit in a rush, you can have a look to attacker B, not just because it has a lot of fields that are nice to see, but also because everything is complemented by, besides a technical analysis, also a comment sections by expert, and you have all the exploits listed. But the comment section, as you can see, for example, you see 3 views and 2 comments. That 2 comments, it might be also 5 or 10. It's nice because sometimes it involves maybe people who are closer to the vendor and so on, but basically it's good for skimming out the panic that creates for this. Conclusions. I would say lack of data quality. Security researchers, they exploit poor oversight. So we have novel challenges because what we thought being white hats, So I find vulnerabilities for the sake of the word. In the end, they do it for fame. They do it for the recognitions. Not all of them, but they exploit the fact that the MVD doesn't check much. So trust but verify approach, unfortunately, towards industry standards, because everyone is recommending MITRE and MVD, but you also need to not trust them blindly. This one is about the second slide, which is also in academia. They are studying the inaccurateness of the MVD. And then, as you could see, there are interesting aids out there to like skim out the noise and complement them with the CVSS score and the CVE. So you can use them as an additional layer if you want to be threat oriented, if you want to be exploitability oriented, and so on. So you could see. And then now the stage is yours. There is a lot of text here, but because maybe some people will not know about some of them. I put 3 vulnerabilities. Okay, the Great Worm, SolarWinds, and then you have Log4Shell, and there will be a yes, that's maybe some of you, but me not yet. I will be like that probably. And then you can choose your fighter. You have a Mentimeter. Okay, I will give you the QR code now, and you can decide which one do you think is the most mystical and the most unique vulnerability. I will keep it here for like other 10 seconds. But yeah, I wrote there also because they are bizarre and so on. And you can choose your fighter. There will be a text box. So if you don't like any of them, or if they are too scary and you have like maybe traumas for them, then you can easily choose your fighter. I think it's supposed to work. You can try it out if you want. Doesn't work. No, okay. I opened the... wow. I did open the survey, so if it doesn't work, my bad. Wow. Ooh. Yeah. We see the results later. If you have suggestions, it's fine. You have a text box, and I'm curious about your insights. And we have 6 minutes, which is cool. Whew. The Great Worm is not, 30 years ago, so... So among the ones that we listed, Log4Shell seems to be the most mystical, and I think I agree. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why. And then, yeah, the trend is that one. Then we can also see the others. CVE 2000. Wait, this is a bit in the future. Did I hope to live enough. Let's... Okay, then I think I have some jokes here. Okay, then overall we can say that the winner... wow. 2008? 0166. So the winner is Log4Shell, but if any of you in the audience, can have the word maybe, and then we go to the questions for 5 minutes. May I ask, if you're not shy, to share the details about CVE 2008-0166? I don't know, where is the microphone? Nice. Ooh. Thank you for the input.
Hey, I added that one. A long time ago, there was the problem with the Debian project where they couldn't accurately or reliably create random numbers anymore. And so all the SSL keys were like reduced to a very small set of SSL keys. Everybody had the same, right? And to this day, I believe it's an intentional backdoor that was added to the Debian project. And nobody believes that, but I do, and so that's why I did it.
Thank you so much.
Look into it. I think it was the greatest CVE ever.
Thank you for the input. Now I believe it as well, but I want to check a bit, but thank you for the input. Then, if you have any questions, I just wanted to show the cat, so now we can have the questions.
First of all, thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. And I wanted to ask you for your personal opinion about EPSS, because we also deal a lot with a lot of vulnerabilities with high CVSS. And then for some of them, you see super low EPSS. Do you really rely on it to like kind of reduce the noise and say, okay, we don't take care of this? Or because I think it's a little bit not so transparent, like where these sources are coming from, or the like data
of the exploitability. So since it's a machine learning model, first of all, of course, it's learning tweak by tweak, tweak and repeat. And besides having historical data, it's the nice thing is that what you said might be true today, but not be true tomorrow, because they keep ingesting data. They get it from Metasploit and Exploit DB and other tools. So I would say I wouldn't say go for that now, but I can say that there might be some noise there. Okay. But I personally think that the fact that things evolve dynamically, it's for sure a good hint. Okay, maybe you can say that it cannot be maybe reliable for things that don't have already some hints out there, but it will for sure be reliable whenever they get some sources out there and they ingest it, then the score is nice, and they will use it to learn for next time. So it's always evolving, I would say, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, we have one last question and then we could...
Yeah, empty stomach talk, I'm sorry for that.
Interesting topic. One of the things that I have concerns about when it comes to CVEs is that quite often, I mean, it creates a bit of a bubble, because there are vulnerabilities that don't have a CVE for various reasons. Either the vulnerability researcher did not bother. I know I'm guilty of that in the past. They might have released an advisory, but it got no CVE. Or you have the developers for open source projects as well, not just closed source, who do not create the CVE, and so on and so forth. So, and you kind of lightly touched about this when you spoke about the supply chain problems. What are your thoughts about, having a bubble just because if you rely on CVE numbers?
That's a good question. So I would say that I can say that, for example, the BGP protocol is flawed. So it has a lot of flaws, and it was invented in the 70s, and you should not use it. But unfortunately, I'm afraid that, I would say that my talk keeps in mind the fact that you have something and it's recognized and you need to use it and it will be there, and you can either fight it, meaning that you can add some layers and you make things more qualitative in your decisions, or it's quite hard to think that it's replaceable. You know what I mean? So you have a problem and you can work on that problem, but thinking that maybe you have another avenue, it's like it's not like rewriting the internet and BGP, my example, but I think it's quite hard. And to the point of the open source vulnerabilities, the libraries. I would say that, for example, here, some of them, as you can see, they don't have a CV. They have the, how do you call it? They have the ID of maybe the vendor and so on. So not everything, it's relies on the CV, and some open sources project that I listed, they are still detached from that context. Okay. So I would say, yeah, that's my answer, and thank you for the question. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for the interesting presentation. Please give it up once more for Massimo.